I am so happy to be here with you again on another Sunday. I'm getting over some kind of something, releasing it. So I may just indulge me. I may have to drink more water than usual, and I'm got my cough drop. But how I feel is not who I am, and so the I am within me is my strength. The I am within me is my power, and will lead me and guide me in this moment. So I'm excited about this sermon series, and I'm excited about what we're going to share today. Before we get into the sermon, first let me say hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. It is good and always good. And so I invite you here and now to join me in our centering prayer as we use this prayer to take us into our sermon and our series for this month. I welcome the Spirit of truth into my mind, and let it grow in my heart. Thank you, God, in me, through me, and as me. Amen, Ashe. And so it is. And so it is. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Well, as we are in our anniversary month, and we will be celebrating 12 years of CSC this month, I'm thinking so much and reflecting so much. I get into this posture every March. And one of the things that I was thinking about over this past week is one of the things that I love about CSC. I love that CSC is multi-generational, right? We skew on the younger side in terms of spiritual communities in general, but we are multi-generational. And so I'm going to call out the years of the generations, and I would love for you to shout yourself out. You can give me a heart, a thumbs up, a yes, yes, or me, whatever you want to do to represent yourself. So I know we have some baby boomers in the space, right? Baby boomers are those that were born between 1946 and 1964. So if you identify as a baby boomer, give me a heart, give me a yes, yes, give me a thumbs up, give me a me, whatever it is you want to do. So we represent. I think it's beautiful for us to see the generations that are actually represented as part of the CSC community. Now, after the baby boomers, then we have my generation and PY's generation, which is Generation X, anyone born between 1965 and 1980. If you're a Gen Xer, give me a yes, yes, give me a heart, give me a thumbs up, give me something. I'm seeing the hearts coming in, right? I'm seeing them coming in. Wonderful, wonderful. Now, I know we have a whole lot of millennials in the CSC community. So millennials are those that were born between 1981 and 1996. If you are a part of that generation, whether you're a young millennial or a part of the older millennial crowd, because sometimes there's a difference. Give me a heart, give me a yes, yes, give me a thumbs up, give me a hello, it's me. We see the hands going up. And then we have Gen Z. That's my daughter's generation. Anyone that was born in between 1997 and 2009. The Gen Z folks, we love y'all. If Gen Z is in the house, give me a thumbs up, give me a heart, give me a yes, yes. Let me know that you're here. Now, there may also be, I'm thinking about my niece and nephew, there may be some Gen Alphas in the space, anyone born between 2010 and 2024. If there are any Gen Alphas watching right now, give me a heart, give me a thumbs up, give me a yes, yes. I love this. I'm seeing the yes, yeses coming in. I'm seeing the hearts coming in. It's wonderful to see that, right? And so it's interesting to me that the term Gen X, it's credited to and was popularized by a writer by the name of Douglas Copeland. In 1987, in the Vancouver magazine, he wrote an article, and that was where we first saw this idea of Gen X. And of course, then that led us to Gen Z and now Gen Alpha, and starting in 2025, now Gen Beta. And there's something that Douglas Copeland wrote that has nothing to do with that article or his coining of the phrase Gen X, but it's the reason that he sticks in my mind and is someone that I think of often. In one of his novels, he wrote in 2011, The Gum Thief. And you've probably heard me quote this many times. If you haven't heard me quote it, you may have seen me post it on social media. In fact, as we're talking about our anniversary, back in 2013 in our first services, we used to have a slideshow, similar to the slideshow that happens in our streaming services now. where it would be announcements and inspirational quotes. And this was one of the quotes that was a part of that pre-service slideshow. And the quote says simply this: if you don't have a spiritual practice in place when times are good, you can't expect to suddenly develop one during a moment of crisis. I'm going to read that again. If you don't have a spiritual practice in place when times are good, you can't expect to suddenly develop one during a moment of crisis. Now, this quote will be our anchor. This is what will support us this month in our series, Crisis Proof Faith, Building Spiritual Strength Before You Need It Most. Now, I recognize some may hear that quote and you might just hear it and be like, that's something. Others may hear the quote and choose to give up because you may be in a moment of crisis right now. You may be experiencing some sort of turmoil, and you hear you can't expect to suddenly develop a spiritual practice during a moment of crisis, as a signal to not even try. But what should be clear is that in a moment of crisis, in a moment of turmoil, you need a spiritual practice, which is what this quote is inviting us to understand. But it's also inviting us to understand that the time to develop the spiritual crisis is not when our back is against the wall, because it's much harder to do it then. This is the reason that one of the guiding principles of Celebration Spiritual Center is daily spiritual practice is not an option. We recognize the immeasurable gift of a daily spiritual practice, or DSP. And we recognize that the gift of a daily spiritual practice is not so you can manifest, and not so that you can prevent unwanted things from occurring in your life. Because the reason that your DSP cannot be optional is because crises will show up. Your DSP cannot be optional because you will find yourself in turmoil from time to time. Your daily spiritual practice cannot be optional because unwanted things, unwanted people, and unwanted experiences will show up in your life. Your daily spiritual practice cannot be optional because you or someone you love will receive a life-changing diagnosis. But your daily spiritual practice will support you in navigating all of the twists and turns, the wanted and the unwanted, of this human experience. Now, we are at the start of week 7 of the Felon-in-Chief's administration. As promised, this administration has inflicted pain and chaos on our government, on federal workers, on American citizens, and people all around the globe. In the midst of this, we're experiencing rising grocery prices, food supply shortages, bird flu, measles outbreaks, and although it may no longer dominate the news cycle, the aftermath of the fires in Los Angeles is an ever-present reality for countless families, and this is also true for those whose homes and property were destroyed in the hurricanes last year. I think it's safe to say that collectively, we are in a full-blown crisis. But then there's the individual level. Many are living with long COVID or other health challenges, some related and not related to the COVID pandemic. Many are struggling to keep their heads above water and make ends meet. Many are grieving the loss of loved ones. Many are navigating mental health challenges. Many are dissatisfied with the state of their lives and are trying to figure out what's next. And so we hear this quote again. If you don't have a spiritual practice in place when times are good, you can't expect to suddenly develop one during a moment of crisis. And so my simple message to you today, whether you are in a moment of crisis or not, whether you are affected by the collective crisis or experiencing an individual crisis, the time to prepare is now. Now, I won't sugarcoat this. If you have not had a spiritual practice in place, or if it's been a while, if it's raggedy and it's sometimey, it might be difficult and uncomfortable in the beginning. And this is why this quote from Douglas Copeland is saying that you can't suddenly develop one. It's not that you cannot develop one. Rather, it simply means that you're going to have to be patient with yourself. It means that you're going to have to give yourself some grace, because it is not going to be a sudden practice. See, the thing that I love about the daily spiritual practice, and I think this is important because I see often that the daily spiritual practice is misapplied, right? Many of you are using your daily spiritual practice to manifest, right? Many of you are using your daily spiritual practice and using the 555 to acquire things, right? Or to change things. But that's not the point or the goal of the daily spiritual practice, right? The point and the goal is connection, right? The point and the goal is also to feed your heart and mind so that when you're in a moment of crisis, you have something to draw upon. And I may use this song next week, but I'm thinking of the song, God Looks Good As Me, right? When I wrote that song, I was in an experience of crisis. In my own mind, I was churning a bunch of thoughts in my mind. And once I became aware of the thoughts in my mind, those thoughts were not loving, they were not constructive, they were not beneficial, and they were definitely not thoughts that I would want to be made manifest. And so I stopped myself and said, Greg, what do you know to be true? And as I replied to myself, the lyrics of that song came forth. The truth is I'm perfect, whole, and complete. I remain as God created me. Truth is I'm wonderful, a miracle in 3D. Yes, yes, oh yes. God looks good as me. And so I was doing what Myrtle Fillmore invites us to do. Use the truth you know. See, when your back is against the wall, and I'm reminded, shout out to the Affirmative Prayer Mastermind. We just had our last class. I was sharing this with them in the class a few weeks ago, right? When your back is against the wall, you're not going to be able to access everything that you've ever read, right? But if you've been feeding your mind, if you've been feeding your spirit words of truth, there's something you're going to be able to draw on in that moment that will support you in recognizing that you're not alone, that will support you, that you have strength, that you have power, that you have options. Otherwise, you're going to make choices from desperation. And so we recognize that then this is what our practice is designed to do. And so if you haven't had a regular practice, if it's sometimey, if it's raggedy, whatever that looks like, forgive yourself and set yourself free. This is not about judgment. But it is a recognition that now, as you are in the moment of crisis, it is going to be gradual, right? In your process of developing it. And as you move through the crisis, then it's going to be very important that when times are good, you are lockstep, right? Locked in and continuing with your daily spiritual practice, recognizing that it's going to benefit you when the inevitable winds and waves of life show up. So I want to share a story with you. It's a story about a little boy. He was walking home from school one day and he noticed a discarded plant on the curb. The plant was in bad shape. The leaves were brown and yellowed. The plant was slumped over and dry. But he decided to take the plant home because he wanted to take care of it. So he rushes home and he takes the plant to his bedroom. Then he goes to the kitchen and asks his mom for some water. He doesn't tell her what it's for, but proudly he takes the water to his room and begins to water the leaves of the plant. A few days go by and the plant is still in bad shape. He brings the plant to his mom with tears in his eyes, explaining how he wanted to take care of this dying plant and watering the leaves isn't making a difference. Seeing his pain, his mom says, "Oh, baby, watering the leaves won't heal the plant. You've got to water the soil." He looks puzzled. Water the soil? The dirt? She goes on to explain that we're not actually watering the soil. The water gets down to the roots so that the plant can get a drink of the water and receive nourishment. When you water the roots, the leaves and the stems get what they need to grow and turn green. Of course, the moral of this story is to water the root, or as Maharishi Mahesh Yogi says, water the root to enjoy the fruit. He writes, when life shows signs of decay, when civilization shows lack of possibility of any further advancement, Mother Nature takes care of this. The revival of understanding about life, that when relative life begins to bring pressure on the individual, we turn to the absolute. Bring more energy from there, more intelligence from there, more happiness from there, more life from inside to support the outer life. The time to prepare is now. When the relative life begins to bring pressure on the individual, pressure on communities, pressure on groups of people, what is most necessary is that we go within, because it is there that we get more energy. It is there that we get more intelligence. It is there that we get more happiness. It is there that we get the very life, the sustenance that we need to support the outer life. And so what's happening here out in the world, what many people are doing, not understanding this, not understanding what's necessary in order to be able to stand firm in the midst of these crises and move through to the other side of these crises. Everybody's doing all these external things. I was remembering during the election cycle, there was Kamala Harris, Vice President Kamala Harris was being interviewed by Maria Shriver. And she was asking her, like, what do we do? What do you do? How do you stay calm? She's like, I'm out here, I'm taking edibles, I'm doing all the things, right? Nothing wrong with taking edibles, right? For fun. But if you're taking edibles to respond to the crisis, right, you're still going to be lost. And so what we know, if we take this metaphor of watering the root and take this metaphor of the plant, we know that in order for a plant to thrive, it needs three things. It needs water, earth, and sun. And so for you, the time to prepare, I want you to start to think about what your water, earth, and sun are. Now, first, your water is your daily spiritual practice, right? And if you're not familiar with the daily spiritual practice, at the end of the sermon, I'm going to tell you about that, how you can learn all about that, right? Very simple 15-minute practice. Your daily spiritual practice is the watering, and that needs to happen all the time. When I say all the time, consistently, every day, 15 minutes a day, no matter what, rain or shine, no matter what's happening, if you whatever your bank account looks like today versus what it looks like tomorrow versus what it looks like next week, right? Whether you're gainfully employed or unemployed, right? This is something that, just like brushing your teeth every day, you do your daily spiritual practice. That's the water. Now, the earth is your daily physical practice and the activities that are life supporting. And what's interesting about this, because when I say physical practice, I mean there are things that we must do in our outer life that support what we've been doing in our inner spiritual life. And so this has me thinking about even things. There's not a day that goes by that I'm not reading an article about sleep and sleep hygiene, and what's beautiful in the ways in which we have studies now that are really letting us understand and know the power of sleep and why that's so important. Even when we think about, just for our general health, but even when we're thinking about weight loss and other things, right? When we think about physical activity as well, the best physical activity you could ever do is take a walk, right? Each day, right? So it's not about working out or going to the gym or getting on a treadmill or lifting weights, right? But what are those things that are life supporting? And you find those things that are good for you, that feel good to you, excuse me. And then you have the sun. And we know that the sun, shines on all of Earth, right? And every being on Earth, every plant and animal, all of us, we all benefit from the sun. And what the sun represents is the vision you hold for your life. So while you're watering your root, right? And then the earth represents that physical aspect, right? Of daily physical activities and practice, right? What is the overall vision for your life? And this is where even in our reading today from the Daily Word, this idea of when I have a positive outlook on life, right? It's based on what you've made up in your own mind to believe. What we know to be true is that sense of optimism, that sense of tapping into hope for your own life and hope for what's possible for you, that leads to health outcomes that are beneficial. That leads to just a longevity of life. We see that over and over again, and there's studies that corroborate the spiritual idea, which is ancient, but now we've been able to study it and we know it's true. So you have your water, you have your earth, you have your sun. This is how you prepare. You're going to need to tap into what that is on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, because outer life is not going to get any less complex. I've seen a lot of people posting about it recently, and it's really true. I think there's some folks that are stuck thinking that somehow we're going to go back to life in 2019. Like, oh, okay, we'll finally get through all of this and things will go back to normal, right? 2019 is gone, right? All that our reality was, our pre-pandemic world, all of those things, like, and really what is happening, something new is being birthed, right? We're seeing, and it's symbolic when we're seeing like different stores that are closing. I'm still lamenting, PY and I talk about it all the time, the Container Store, is closing. I saw that Joann Fabrics, right, is closing, right? And so those of us that are of a certain age, things that Party City is gone, y'all. Like, I'm still trying to figure out where I'm gonna get balloons from. Those of us that are of a certain age, where these things that we've just relied on, that were always there, that always existed, right, are falling to the wayside. But we understand that metaphysically, right, that every ending is a new beginning, right? And so something is emerging, something is being born. And again, that's just a very factual statement. I'm not even getting into a deep esoteric idea of like birthing the new earth. We could talk about that, but I'm not going that far with this. I want you to see that as you're seeing certain things are ending, certain things are falling, certain things are closing, because new things are emerging. And this tracks with the astrology. It tracks with so many things in terms of the space that we're in right now in the world. So the time to prepare is now. I talked about this in the Prosper 2025 series in January, and I'll continue to do so. You and only you have the power to regulate your nervous system. This should actually be everyone's goal and on everyone's vision board. Because until your nervous system is regulated, you cannot actually make full use even of the tools of manifestation, because your system is functioning at a threat level, living from fight, flight, or freeze. And so even when you manifest, and I've experienced this in my life, manifested a whole bunch of stuff, and eventually it all went away. I reset back to where I really was in consciousness, right? Because I had not healed a bunch of things, right? I had a bunch of anger and unforgiveness and things going on that I needed to heal, right? And so this is why the time to prepare is now. So even if you think about the life that you want, you think about your biggest dream, you think about the things that you want to bring into manifestation as your life, the easiest way to do that is to start focusing on regulating your nervous system. And what's interesting as well, I know that folks out here with unregulated nervous systems, I can see it clearly, and I'll take a perfect example because this is recent, right? So on Friday, we had a national boycott, right? And I trust that many of you participated, PY and I participated. But what I found interesting was the way that people had something to say, right? As we moved towards the boycott, people wanted to criticize, oh, it's not going to happen, or oh, this isn't enough, whatever, right? And then on the day of the boycott, people wanted to talk about folks that were not boycotting, or all of these different things. But see, all of that is a manifestation of your operating from your ego and operating from fight, flight, or freeze, because it's like you're still looking for an enemy. right? So it's like, I'm over here boycotting, but look at them over there. See, when your nervous system is regulated, it's live and let live. I'm choosing to do what I'm choosing to do based on my knowledge and information, my desire for the world that I want to see, my desire for the world that I want to co-create. And so, like last week, we talked about mind your business. Like, this is another layer of minding your business, but I'm minding my spiritual business. So I really don't have time to be looking for who is not participating, because I'm too involved in what I'm participating in. Right? We talked about that idea last week about what you're entertaining. And so we recognize that this is very, very, very important. The time to prepare is now. Now, we are where we are in terms of the current occupant of the White House. We are where we are in terms of the many things that are outside of our direct control or influence. But where you have power and agency is your own mind. Where you have power, direct power and agency, are your emotions. Where you have direct power and agency is how you respond to things. This is why one of the sermons in our study series for this month is shut down your reactors. When your nervous system is regulated, you respond, you don't react. And most of the time, what I've learned, that means I just hush. Right? Is it true? Is it helpful? Is it inspiring? Is it necessary? Is it kind? No, it's none of those things. Okay, I'm going to hush. And it reminded me, I saw this quote on social media, and I've seen this many times. If the ocean can return to stillness, so can you. So many of you may think that this idea, of a regulated nervous system is far-fetched. One of the reasons that we advocate the practice of the transcendental meditation technique is the fact that it's easy and it's effortless and it doesn't require belief. You can be a skeptic and will experience the benefits of this meditative practice, right? It only requires 20 minutes twice a day. If the ocean can return to stillness, so can you. So maybe you like the idea and it's like, I know I need to regulate. I want to regulate. I want to release these things. I hear you, PG, but it just seems like too much for me. It seems too far-fetched. This is where the principle of correspondence is wonderful, because the ocean is no different than you. As turbulent as the ocean can be, the ocean experiences hurricanes. The ocean experiences monsoons. The ocean experiences all sorts of atmospheric calamity. If the ocean can return to stillness, so can you. And that's an important point, because a lot of times when we hear nervous system regulation, we think that it means, some may think that it means that you're walking through life like, there's me. That's not what it is, right? It's the ability to rise. You experience every emotion, right? Having a regulated nervous system doesn't mean you don't get pissed off. Doesn't mean you don't get angry, but you also, your regulated nervous system knows that you don't act from anger, right? Acting from anger is destructive. Feeling anger and being aware of it is instructive. And so I know that many of you may be feeling like your life is too busy. Like, listen, I can't be doing all this meditation and all this stuff, right? I just don't have the time. I invite you to hear the words of Dr. H. Emily Cady in Lessons in Truth. I quote her all the time, doing is secondary to being. But in that same passage, she says this: watch carefully, and you will find that there are some things, even in the active, unselfish doing, that would be better left undone than that you should neglect regular meditation. And so she's talking to people like you and people like me. I know you're out here being a beneficial presence in the world. I know that you're doing wonderful things. I know that you're taking care of people. You're taking care of your family. You're taking care of your children. You're taking care of loved ones. You're leading powerful careers. You're leading organizations. You're leading businesses, right? And so it's like, I don't have time to do this. And the things that I'm doing are actually wonderful. They're active, unselfish doings. But even that would be better left undone than that you should neglect regular meditation, regular connection. The time to prepare is now. And so in closing, I want to share something with you that I shared back in 2022. There was a sermon that I gave then in our Love God, Love You, Love People series. And the sermon was titled Before and After. And I want to bring this wisdom back to your mind today because it applies. In my opinion, one of the most profound things that we read about the life and ministry of Jesus, it's not the miracles that Jesus performed. For me, in my opinion, the most profound aspect of what we read about the ministry of Jesus is how he dealt with the many crises in his life. Many, M-A-N-Y, not M-I-N-I. The varied crises in his life. And you probably don't even think about that. Like, wait, Jesus had a bunch of crises? Actually, he did. He faced a lot of different things. And if we look in Luke 5:16, we see something interesting. We read, so he himself often withdrew into the wilderness and prayed. Now that line right there is telling us how Jesus dealt with crises and how he dealt with them in a spiritual way that's different, how he watered the root, right? That's different than the way that the world teaches us to focus on the external. Often withdrew into the wilderness and prayed. Withdrew. Love that word because that suggests that he retired, he retreated, he removed himself from participation, right? Into the wilderness and prayed. In another moment in Matthew, we read about after he heard that his first cousin, John the Baptist, was beheaded. This is awful news, crisis. It says, when Jesus heard it, he departed from there by boat to a deserted place by himself. There are over 20 verses across the canonized Gospels that show Jesus living this way. Sometimes it says he went out on the water. Sometimes he walked by the sea. I love that image because it reminds me of my daily walks. PY and I were just talking about this, my daily walks on the beach in Barbados. Sometimes he went out to the wilderness, as I read in the first verse. What this demonstrates to us is that the powerful way to move through crises is to have a practice of withdrawing, of retiring, of removing oneself from participation in the chaos so that one can be restored. And then what's interesting is, as I said, there are over 20 verses across the canonized Gospels that demonstrate this. It is always followed by then the profound demonstration. So the miracles required that preparation. The miracles required that going within. That miracles required the watering of the root. No human is immune from the varying crises of the human experience. What we as spiritual beings having a human experience must know and embrace is that our power comes from within. In order to know and make use of this power, we must connect with it daily and connect with it intentionally. Some may think you're being selfish. Some may not understand why you're not joining in as they complain about the state of the world or our country or their individual lives. But I'm reminded of the great character Morpheus in The Matrix. My beliefs don't require them to. You're not asking people to understand. What I know that people do understand, people understand results. What I do know that people understand, they understand outcomes that are good and beneficial. People will understand your calm in the midst of the storm. People will understand your access to the right choices and the right decisions in critical moments, in the moment of turmoil. People will understand who to call when they need support. And you will be able to support them lovingly because you're giving from your overflow. So you've been feeding yourself day in and day out. So you have the capacity to support someone else. The time to prepare is now. Lean into your daily spiritual practice. The goal is not to get something. The goal is to connect to the greater, deepest aspects of yourself, which we call God, which we call the divine, which we call source, which we call the universe. Use whatever name feels good to you. The goal is healing from the inside out, not watering the leaves thinking that they're going to stop turning brown, that they're going to change from brown to green, but to water the root. The goal is to, as Maharishi Mahesh Yogi says, to attend to your inner health and happiness. The goal is to plug in to power. Now, those of you may have been hearing about this for the very first time, and I said I would share this. I never want to be in a space of thinking everyone is already aware. Daily spiritual practice is not an option. Here at CSC, we teach a very simple way to do this, the 5-5-5 method, 15 minutes a day. And so go to YouTube. If you go to our YouTube channel on the homepage and you scroll down, there's a section called Classes and Workshops. The very first video in that section, Transform Your Day in Just 15 Minutes, the powerful daily spiritual practice of 5-5-5. Watch that video. PY and I break down all of the aspects. 5 minutes of meditation, 5 minutes of affirmative journaling, and 5 minutes of inspirational reading, right? There's also a wonderful guide there. There's a study guide. There's recommended books. There's PY provides and actually demonstrates breathing exercises that you can use for your 5 minutes of meditation. So tap into that. Additionally, as we already shared, our study series of the month, that playlist, these sermons are powerful. As we're thinking about the time to prepare is now, these sermons will help you to prepare, right? I read through the list, sermons like I trained for this, right? It'll help you to prepare. Sermons like Walking the Path, inspired by the Matrix series, right? Sermons like PY's There's Gotta Be a Better Way. Oh my God, that's such a powerful sermon, right? And what she's sharing in that sermon is like the real life experiences that happen. And she was like, I cannot keep living this way. There's got to be a better way. She shares a powerful story. It's transforming, right? Her other sermon that's in that playlist, the in between. What do you do when you're not where you were, but you're not where you're going? And that can be very frustrating. And you start to judge yourself. How to navigate the in between. And there's so many other wonderful sermons in there. The time to prepare is now. There are zero indications that this current administration is going to change in some way. And so what we know is that we can prepare internally and develop our inner resilience so that we can withstand the storm, so that we can be there to support those that need support, so that we can be a beneficial presence, so that we can be a loving presence, so that we can make decisions in the moment that are the best decisions for us and our families. All of these things are critically important. I'm excited about where we're going for the rest of this series because there's so many wonderful, wonderful, wonderful things that we're going to share as we are focused on crisis-proof faith, building spiritual strength before you need it most. So to this truth, I say, Amen, Ashe, and so it is.